Thank you for everybody's cooperation. As I said, I will now, I'm just moderating the session. I am part of the team, but our leader is Jenna Sokolowski, so I'm gonna pass it on to her. She is the PI of the grant we're gonna talk about and the director of our program. So Jenna, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vicki. As you all know, Rubin LSST brings with it potential for enormous change. That's change in the way we view the universe, change in the way astronomers interact with data, and change in the way we collaborate with each other. So with this fellowship that we're very excited to announce at this year's project and community workshop, our goal is to take advantage of this very special point in time where we are right now, right before the beginning of this 10-year survey. And we want to catalyze these positive changes with this fellowship. So we are interested in ensuring vigorous discovery during the first years of the survey and throughout the survey in from a broad sector of the population. We're interested in catalyzing as well and facilitating the successful use of big data. And of course, also training young people, new leaders who will help our community thrive in these new collaborations. Now, before I go over the details of this new fellowship, I would like to introduce Amir Ali. And before I start that, can someone confirm? Yes, Amir is here. Thank you. And I agree that we should figure out who the host is so that we can mute people. All right, so I'll go ahead. Wait a second, Amir, I haven't introduced you yet. So Amir is an experimental cosmologist with degrees from Caltech and Johns Hopkins and experience as a Simons Observatory's postdoctoral scholar at UC Berkeley. And Amir has been immensely helpful in us getting this project. So through the process of proposing and revising, submitting proposal and revising it to the Templeton Foundation, Amir was there for us. And so this fellowship is better because of his involvement. And we want to very much thank Amir and the Templeton Foundation for their investment in us, in Rubin Science and the Rubin Science community. So, all right, take it away, Amir.
All right, jumped the gun the first time. Thanks for catching that. And thank you so much for the kind introduction. A bit generous, I would say, but I'll take it. First and foremost, I want to start by congratulating the LSSTC and the Rubin community on being awarded this grant, and in general for everything that's up ahead. We're really excited. Everyone at the foundation is really excited about the observatory, what it's going to mean for astrophysics and astronomy. And we're really thrilled to be what we see as the ground floor sort of in supporting this postdoctoral program. And we see it hopefully as being crucial not only to the immediate successes of the Rubin Observatory, but also for the future of astro and investing in postdocs. Who we see will likely be the leaders in the Rubin Observatory in the future and astro at large. So since Zoom sessions are, of course, the times when you have a captive audience and nobody can ever be distracted, I'll absolutely take advantage of that and your undivided attention and tell you a little bit about the foundation. But especially our interest in math and physical sciences, my department. That's where I'm the PO. And a small hint is if you are interested in applying for funding, hopefully this will be slightly useful for you. So I'll do a little bit of a foundation pitch if you'll indulge me. So our founder was Sir John Templeton. He was a Tennessee native turned Rhodes Scholar, turned Wall Street investor, turned avid Bahamian resident, who was dubbed a Knight Bachelor in 1987 by the Queen. In that year, he founded the John Templeton Foundation. Our foundation supports research on some of the biggest, deepest, and most fundamental questions, reflecting his commitment to intellectual humility and discovery. And this is actually one of my favorite quotes from him. Humility is a gateway to discovery. To learn more, we must first realize how little we already know. In spite of tremendous scientific breakthroughs in recent times, there can still be a vast, possibly infinite amount of knowledge to be learned. So that idea of a vast amount of knowledge yet to be learned is really a key part of our vision to support research and learning, not only in MPS, but in many disciplines. As you see in some of the details I put here on the right, we have grants all over the place. We've studied subjects from black holes and evolution to creativity, forgiveness, free will, across all sorts of disciplines: math, physics, genetics, philosophy, but also cultural evolution, anthropology, psychology, many others. But to zoom in a little bit on MPS, I just want to give you an idea of what some of our goals are. And you'll see that reflected in this grant as well, I believe. So our first goal in MPS is to advance the scientific understanding of the nature of the physical world, pushing new conceptual frontiers. So what we're really after here is fundamentality. We've always had a really strong interest in new ways of thinking, the biggest questions, and those are the sorts of areas that we're interested in exploring and supporting. Our second goal is to clarify our understanding of the scientific endeavor by examining concepts of human reason, logic, and truth. So what we're after here is sort of a meta-reflection on the scientific endeavor as a whole. What does it say about human thought in broad terms? In what ways do the scientific concepts that we might discover in the first goal, how does that challenge our understanding of how we do science or how we think as human beings? Now, the third goal is one I think doesn't get enough play. That goal is expanding humanity's perspective on its place in the world and inspiring a sense of awe and wonder. I think sometimes, especially in the public, science has this bad rap of being kind of cold and calculating. And of course, on the one hand, science can be very concrete and precise. I don't think it gets its due in terms of how interesting and exciting it can be. And we want to try to counter that. I think it's a frankly inaccurate characterization. I think we're all in science because one way or another, we're excited by it. And the way we propose to do that is really emphasizing this idea of having people reflect on what we have learned about the universe, the very big, the very small, everything in between, what's left to learn, and tap back into this kind of natural curiosity and wonder and excitement that people have, especially young people. And we really hope that they will be attracted to science through this approach. So you'll see a lot of this reflected in any of the various science outreach work that we fund. The fourth one is to build capacity among MPS scientists to engage in interdisciplinary conversations, allowing them to bring their MPS work and expertise to bear on broader issues of shared concern. So here, what we're trying to think is, without distracting anybody from their main interests and main expertise, it's really a shame if specialization leads to siloing and leads to people not being able to engage in fruitful conversations across disciplines. MPS has so much to say, and the kinds of skills that we have in MPS are relevant to so many fields. And a really good example of this is, even just in COVID response. I mean, on the one hand, you're dealing with really clinical virology type questions, but then you have statistics and epidemiology, behavioral sciences, and then you have to think about maybe even advertising and marketing and fields that you wouldn't even think of in terms of the sciences. But if you want to come up with a COVID response, you have to somehow play with all of those. Not saying I have any interesting, ideas on that, but just to bring the point that ultimately, some of the biggest conversations require a facility to be able to speak to people in multiple languages, so to speak. And the last thing I want to say about this is just keep these four goals in mind as you look through some of what's going to be presented. I'm not going to, sort of tip the hand of the presenters coming after me on, the work that their own work that they're going to be presenting. But I really do think that this proposal is a really good exemplar of all four of these. And I think this is actually, this proposal is actually an example of a project that came in that had ideas and a vision that was really aligned with what we're trying to do in MPS at the foundation. But I like to think that to a certain extent, we were also able to help inspire and motivate the final form of the project. And we hope that was ultimately for the better. So the last bit on our topics of interest in MPS, these are sort of our three main topics of interest at the moment: cosmology, quantum foundations, and emergence complexity. And I've just listed, this is obviously not exhaustive at all, just a few examples of the kinds of topics we might be interested under each. But there's also topics sort of in between. We're also really interested in the in-between kind of questions. So, cosmology, cross quantum, okay, things like inflation and so forth. And then, something that hits a little bit of all three, areas of quantum gravity that explore quantum information, holography, etc. We're really interested in the intersections as well. A quick rundown of our calendar, just because this might actually be relevant. So our deadline for open submissions, in case you're interested in getting money, and who isn't, August 20th is our deadline for open funding inquiries. The bad news is that that's 10 days away. The good news is that it's a really short pre-proposal. It should be very doable unless you're completely have no ideas. It should be doable to put in something for that. And if it's a good idea, we'll sift through those. That takes a little bit of time, and then we'll invite for full proposals, usually in Q4. At that point, that's a little bit more of a commitment. You do a regular full proposal at the usual 10 to 15 page-ish length, typical NASA, NSF level of detail. And that's typically due around January. And then it'll go through a few rounds of internal and external review. The folks that worked on this grant can tell you all about that. And one part of that that's actually helpful, I think, and hopefully they would say the same, is that we have a bounce system where we actually send back our comments. Typically, a proposal wouldn't, unless it's definitely not going to fly, it typically wouldn't just get rejected offhand. There's typically an opportunity to respond to referee comments, and sometimes also incorporate the suggestions, which occasionally are actually extremely helpful. And then final decisions go out in June, and that has, for an invited full proposal, the approval rate is somewhere between a third to 50%. I think the last couple of years it's been around 50%. So I'll just end on a semi-personal note here. As mentioned, as Jenna mentioned, I was a postdoc until pretty recently on the Simons Observatory. So here's a very flattering picture of me next to the Small Aperture Telescope I worked on. And then one from my grad school days when I was deployed in Chile for the CLASS telescope. It's just over the hill from ALMA, so not all that far from where VRO is. And I'm actually only one of two physicists on staff at MPS. My boss is more senior to me and is a quantum optics guy by training, actually. So I can say, on my own behalf, personally, on behalf of my colleagues at MPS and everybody at the foundation, even the board was really, really excited about this initiative. I can say we're really invested in helping this to be a successful program, and we want to do our best as funders, not only to fund the science, but also to be responsible stewards. And you'll hear a bit about that with regards to some of the innovative aspects of this fellowship that we really valued, like the extensive mentorship and the inclusion of the social sciences. So I'll just say, on behalf of the foundation, I'd like to again congratulate and thank the LSSTC, not only for all their past service, contributing to the Rubin Observatory, but for now being our partners on the ground and administrators for this program. We have every confidence that this will be a great success, and we can't wait to see what all of you discover about our universe. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Amir. Thanks a lot for your interest in this project and all your support along the way. So now I'll turn it to Jenna, who will give a lot more of the details of the program.
Right, so
And
now,
Pat, will you share the slides? It's the present, yeah.
great, thanks, Pat. And before I start, I'd actually like to just respond to one thing Amir said, which was about the difference in the experience of applying for a large grant from the Templeton Foundation versus something like a NASA grant or an NSF, where it's a big closed door at the federal agencies and you just get a yes and some comments and a no, and there's no process of back and forth. This was completely different and really wonderful, actually, to have the opportunity to work together to make something better and to address the comments and feel like we're all on the same team trying to come up with something great. Okay, good. Now moving into the details. Today, for the details of the fellowship, I'm going to focus on, since most of the people in the audience are astrophysicists or maybe software engineers or data scientists, and probably not any of you are social scientists, I'm going to focus a little bit on the perspective of the astrophysicists in the room. So Pat, if you could go forward. So first, let me start by reviewing the basic parameters of the fellowship. And right off the top, I want to tell you that this fellowship will be competitive with other top fellowships that you are familiar with, the NASA Hubble, things like that. So it has some of the same basic parameters: complete academic freedom, given that your proposed research is related to LSST science, a competitive stipend and research allowance, and annual symposia. So these are just the basic properties of a top tier fellowship. For specific to this one, there will be 5 astrophysics fellows per year in these first 2 years that are funded. And I should mention, I'm talking about 2 cohorts that are funded. And however, we have, based on our conversations with potential funders, we're optimistic about the program continuing. But right now we'll be focusing on the first group of fellows. Our selection committee will be seeking cohorts that are excellent, diverse, and balanced. And so when I refer to, I should start by saying the fellowships are open to all. That's all within a few years of their PhD. And that is from institutions both in the US and outside of the US. And in this particular context, what I mean is there are no restrictions on whether your institution or country is currently has negotiated data rights for LSST data. You're still welcome to apply for this fellowship. Moreover, there'll be a very wide choice of host institutions for the incoming fellows. 4 out of 5 of them will sit at LSST member institutions, and there are actually, if you could go, yes, LSST member institutions. There are approximately 30 such institutions, but some of them are actually consortia of multiple institutions. So the actual choice of institutions is significantly larger than 30 institutions for those 4 out of 5 fellows. One of the astrophysics fellows will sit at what we're calling an expansion site. So the expansion sites can in principle be any institution in the US, but our intent with these sites is consistent with the message that's been coming through this whole meeting and at our discussion on Link yesterday, is about really broadening the impact and access of LSST and access to discovery with LSST data. So we envision those expansion sites being small or minority serving or historically underserved institutions. And our partnerships task force is working with some institutions that fall into that category. And so for applicants, there'll be a list of those on the website that already have established that they are capable of hosting postdocs and that they're excited to receive an LSST focused postdoc. Although applicants can certainly find other institutions like that on their own. So next slide, please. Okay, so the basic features are competitive with some of the top prize fellowships, but this one has some additional special features, and these speak to some of the goals that Amir mentioned. So first of all, this fellowship is cross-disciplinary. For, in addition to the 10 astrophysics fellows that will be funded in the first 2 years, we will also select 2 to 4 social science fellows. And like with the astrophysicists, we don't know exactly what they'll study because they'll submit applications and they'll have a research plan. And but we anticipate that these will be social science research related to the Rubin LSST community, the specific fellows that are working on astrophysics, but also the broader community, including the science collaborations, member institutions, and LINC itself. So those social scientists will investigate the practice of astronomy in the era of big data, team science, how to build inclusive teams, and things like that. And the astrophysics fellows will have the opportunity to work with these social science fellows and participate in their research as much as desired. So another special aspect of the fellowship is structured collaboration, structured mentoring and leadership training. So again, beyond what a typical prize fellow would get, they might get some funding that's pretty decent and then, you know, told to go off and do some good research, come back in 3 years with some nature papers. Here we're going to actually help make that happen. So we'll give you some good funding and nice timeline, but also provide the opportunity to put together a collaboration and mentoring committee of senior researchers. If you're an astronomer, mostly astronomers, but also at least one social scientist, they're going to give you advice and help you make connections and check in, kind of in a way like a thesis committee for a student, but more peer-to-peer level. We'll also provide some group flexible leadership training courses for the cohort of fellows. Importantly, these mentor collaborators will not just be giving you the dregs of what's left over of their busy schedule, because we're going to provide several of them with small grants themselves so that they actually have the capacity to meaningfully interact with the fellows and give them significant amount of time. One of these mentor collaborators will be an active member of the science collaborations, providing a route between the fellows and these broader collaborations in the community, and maybe even a leadership role in the science collaborations. And one will be from a small or historically under-resourced institution to help the fellow broaden their experience of how research is done. Okay, one fellow per cohort will also sit at one of these expansion sites that I described a bit on the first slide. So I won't go into that again in great detail, except to mention that in addition to the default 3-year terms that many fellows will be offered, fellows who select expansion sites will be offered 4-year fellowship terms. This is to enable them to do research fully in maybe a non-traditional environment. They'll also get additional research funds and have their expansion site institution partnered in a mutually beneficial partnership with an LSST member institution. Okay, next slide. Okay. So the final 2 special features that I want to review for this fellowship are that it's connected to something bigger. It's connected to the LINC initiative that we described at our session yesterday. So as you heard yesterday, if you attended that session, there is a funded LINC software program currently where researchers will be participating in LINC, will be developing platforms that will be beneficial for all kinds of LSST analysis. And so fellows who decide that they would like to be heavily engaged or maybe a little more engaged than others in that type of work, whether it's developing or beta testing some tools, will have the opportunity to have 4-year terms at these sites so that they can also publish. They can work on tools and publish, so they're set up for in a good place for their career path. And there's several other ways the fellows will be connected to LINC: monthly topical group meetings, and invitations to serve on scientific organizing committees, also supporting their career development and their leadership paths. And finally, fellows will all have automatic delegate status for the LSST data previews. connecting to our desire for them to be ambassadors for Rubin LSST science. Next slide. So you might be thinking, okay, so LSST Corporation put in this proposal to the Templeton Foundation. Who are these people that are designing and running this fellowship? So the answer is, if your institution is a member of LSSTC, you are participating or have the opportunity to participate in designing and running this fellowship. So as a reminder, LSSTC is a nonprofit member-based organization. You can think of us as a consortium of about 30 research institutions, and those institutions pooled their resources, both financial and in terms of service, to work together to make this proposal come to fruition and to really make this happen. So the proposal team itself was drawn from 8 of those LSSTC member institutions, picking some from, they included institutions both inside and from outside the US, and small and large institutions, and at least one person who is a co-chair of a science collaboration. So most of those people have now transitioned to form the fellowship steering committee. So their work in designing this program and coming up with this proposal has now morphed into them helping to continue to make the decisions that come up as people start to apply and ask questions, and helping us think through what's the best way to answer all those questions. In particular, the leadership team was involved in helping very much with the proposal, and that's one of the steering committee co-chair, Vicky Calugera, who's serving as our moderator today, and also Catherine Johnston, who is not able to be here today, and myself, who's directing the program. And we're also working with task forces to resolve several issues involved with getting the fellowship established. And those task forces include at least 25 volunteers from 16 member institutions. So this really is a community effort. And if you're thinking, I would like to be involved in some of this decision-making, it's not too late. Your department can still join LSSTC and be a part of crafting this kind of program for the community. Okay, next, Pat. This is my final slide. So just how and when to apply. We do expect applications for the first cohort to be due in November. And maybe more importantly, what Jim will talk about is we'll run an Ideas Lab virtual workshop in October, probably on October 8th. And if you're interested in applying, or if you have a student or colleague that you think might want to apply to this, you should encourage them to register for that virtual workshop. That will help them learn about the fellowship and also put together a stronger application. So we aim to launch our Fellowship and Link website in early September. So please keep an eye on the LSSTC website. It will contain all the information that you're seeing here and more, and registration for the Ideas Lab. And thank you. And I think next will be Jim talking about the first step in the application process.
Excellent. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, so I will share and echo Jenna and Amir's excitement. I think this is going to be a really unique and really amazing new program. I can't wait to see who our first cohort of fellows is. And to try to find that cohort, we are going to be hosting, I think, a unique sort of community engagement session that we're calling the Ideas Lab. Go ahead, next slide, Pat. Thank you. So the short summary here is that it's going to be a virtual info session led about a week in advance of the workshop, and then a one-day virtual workshop is what we're planning on right now to bring together prospective mentors. So these are applicants, people who know they want, mentors are the people from the LSSTC member institutions that know they want to host a fellow, or from the expansion sites that are excited about hosting fellows, and also prospective fellows. And so we're hoping to get a large group of prospective fellows to come and give us a couple hours of their time in early October so that we can talk about the fellowship, they can generate ideas, and they can have hopefully meaningful connections to new mentors. One really important facet of this is that it's a community event. This is supposed to be engaging to generate new ideas, to hopefully make connections between fellows and host institutions that they didn't expect. I would love if all the fellows didn't just apply to the top few institutions, but instead made connections to the broader LSSTC community. And so we're hoping to sort of facilitate some of those connections where they might be unexpected. And importantly, this is not part of the selection process. This is a community event meant to spark collaboration and engagement. And nobody from the selection team will be present. People like me and Jenna will be present to tell you about the fellowship, but not the people who will actually be selecting fellows. Next slide, please. So our goals, as I said, are to introduce the fellowship to the community, both through some webinars and also through just open Q&A sessions. We'd like to be able to convey the specific details, like we've been talking about here today, the unique aspects of the fellowship, useful details about applications, what the materials are, things like that. So we'd like people to be able to have the strongest application possible from coming to this Ideas Lab. We'd like this to be a sort of a value-added event for people to have the best applications possible. And we would like the Ideas Lab to help generate the largest and most diverse population of applicants that we can to get the strongest cohort of Catalyst Fellows in place. As has already been said, we have interests in multidisciplinary science across the LSST Rubin science landscape. And so we'd like to not just get applicants that are all in one science area, but trying to get as many different ideas into the application pool. Our goal is not to try to do speed dating, to not try to get fellows to chat with as many people as possible. Instead, I think the optimization is trying to get prospective fellows to have a few high quality chats, something like 20 or 30-minute chats is what I envision with potential mentors. And so to do that, we'd like to facilitate connections. And so we'll have, as part of the application process, a little brief questionnaire about the interests of the fellows and the mentors will have, and we'll try to facilitate some of those connections. And again, we hope that this Ideas Lab will help begin to establish the sense of community that Link is trying to build. Next slide. So before the Ideas Lab, people will register. The links will hopefully be live on the website soon. We'll have scheduled meeting times that we'll set up so people will be able to put it in their calendars. Because we're in this virtual setting, we'll try to span and optimize time zones. Of course, it'll be imperfect, but we'll do our best to try to make a broad day being broadly defined in the virtual sense. And then during the Ideas Lab itself, we'll host this webinar. There will be some basic webinar stuff like this where we're conveying boilerplate information. We'll do that the week ahead. And then the day of, during the Ideas Lab proper, we'll have a mix of sort of short presentations, things to sort of inspire people to get conversations going, and then these one-on-one meetings. And we're also looking for some sort of social interactive space. This might be through a platform like Sparkle or GatherTown or something like this. We're working right now to figure out what the right platform is to get people to come together and have some interactivity and not just having a bunch of one-on-one Zoom calls. Next slide. As Jenna mentioned, we're targeting October 8th, Friday, as being our notional date for the Ideas Lab. The info session hopefully will be about a week before then, and will be recorded and posted online. So that will be just in sort of a standard Zoom webinar format. And again, we're working on figuring out what the best interactive platform is. And then next slide, I think my last slide here. And a plea at the end here is that we need your help. If you're part of a member institution, we'll be reaching out. In fact, I think some emails have already started to go out to member institutions trying to get input. If you would like to host one of these fellows, we'd like to get information from you to try to make these connections. If you're interested in applying for these fellowships, the registration will open hopefully soon on the website. If you think you know of a great fellow or somebody who's graduating soon, please get the word out or help make these connections for us. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, you can send them to me. Specifically about the Ideas Lab, but in general, reach out to us, and we'd love to hear from the community. And I think that's my last slide. Yes, and so I will hand it off to Masao, who will tell us about the selection process.
Thanks, Jim. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Great. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the sort of the behind-the-scenes activities going on how to finalize the selection process and criteria for this fellowship. Can you advance the slide? Thank you. So we have several members from LSSTC member institutions who are participating in this process for selecting, for the selection process and criteria, but also how to put together the review panel the committee for this fellowship, which will most likely be external people, but this is still under discussion. We have members from 5 of our LSSTC member institutions who are on this task force that is putting together this process. Includes people from Columbia, Northwestern, Oxford, Penn, and Texas A&M. And we have faculty to graduate students participating in this process. And as Jenna mentioned, our main goal is to be able to select an excellent, diverse, and balanced cohort of astrophysicists, as well as social scientists for this fellowship. Next slide, please. Okay, again, like I said, nothing has been set in stone at this point, but there are some things that we sort of know what's happening. The application material that we will ask for or expect to ask for is probably similar to some of the other prestigious fellowships like the Hubble and Einstein fellowships with small differences. So we'll ask for a research statement, which is pretty standard across all of these applications. We will also ask for what we call a community impact statement, which, if you're familiar with the NSF proposals, this is kind of similar to the broader impacts statement, which will hopefully describe how your research and your proposed activities will impact not just your own research, but a broader broader community and more people than the people who are immediate collaborators. We will also ask for a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. We'd like to hear from applicants what their feelings and philosophies are about DEI. We will also ask for a letter of commitment from the first choice institution and the potential mentor of the applicant. So the Ideas Lab, I think, will play an important role in this part of the application. And then there are other standard things like CVs, list of references, and so forth. We will probably look at these things that are listed on the bottom of this slide. In our selection process, research excellence, of course, is one of the most important things that we will look for, but also community impact, what larger group of people your research and proposed activities will reach. Of course, the research is hopefully relevant to Rubin and LSST science and not on JWST and other interesting science, but not related to LSST. We will also likely look at your proposed research and how that could nicely integrate with the host institution and, more importantly, with the mentor who will hopefully provide good mentorship to the applicant. And then, of course, the passion for collaborative research. LSST is so large, it's likely that a single person is not going to be able to do all of the important work. Next slide, and this is the last slide. I think I already said most of these, but we really expect the fellows to be able to have a lot of freedom in their research, hopefully make major breakthroughs in the early few years of LSST data acquisition, and also to serve as ambassadors for LSST science. We hope that the applicants have the desire to work collaboratively with other astrophysicists who are part of the research project, but also with the other members of the cohort, including the social scientists, and to be able to work with them to make LSST a better place for everyone to do their work. And to develop critical connections with each other and with scientific collaborations across the LSST community. That's all I had. I'm going to pass the baton to Iman.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Yes, so I am today covering for Catherine Johnston, who is leading this partnership part of the fellowship. So next slide, please. Okay, so it's a kind of a summary of what Geno said at the beginning, but I think it would be helpful to state it again. So the Catalyst Fellowship would have 2 cohorts, and Geno said already that we have 5 astrophysicists in the fellow and 1 or 2 fellows in social science, so it's cross-disciplinary, and the applicant can be from the US or international institution or expansion site. And we focused in our group on the expansion site. So the goal, why expansion site first? So we want to, LSSTC wants to fulfill like the mission of the research and education, but also to make sure that the data, the LSST data, is widely used from the scientists and undergrad to the professors to the broader audience. So we want to reach this the population beyond like the traditional users of the survey data in academia. We mentioned the big institution, the big universities with a lot of networking and connections, but we want to encourage these expansion sites in order to integrate them into the LSST community. That's why we specifically target 1 fellow from the expansion site, and we want to help build the fellow skills for working in like this broad and diverse community that maybe would not be available in its original institution. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just, again, another summary of what is proposing for the expansion side. So as we said before, so first, we are targeting the small institution and that serve underserved population for colleges. So what I mean by that is HBCU, indigenous colleges, and any minority serving universities. The little difference that we are, actually I'm going to talk about it in the next slide, but what I'm saying here is just for this expansion side, this is the difference that we are proposing compared to a regular fellow from a different bigger institution is 4 years term, as Geno said, instead of 3 years, an additional 10K per year in research fund on the top of the 25K already available. And we send as well support for the expansion side. So we build a partnership with the expansion side. So the larger institution will be partnered with the small one, and we have a 50K available in research fund over the 3 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we're trying to explain how do we select this expansion site. So our partnership task force wants to define basically what's these expansions, and we don't have something set in stone. Basically, we are trying to figure out who would be a good candidate for the expansions. I mentioned that what we want is the minority serving institution, but there are big universities, Berkeley, for example, where I am, University of Berkeley, serve a minority student, but it has a huge department of astrophysics, a lot of networks, UC, Santa Cruz as well. So these are not the institutions that we are targeting in the expansion side. It doesn't have to be small either, because, for example, City University of New York is a big institution, but it doesn't have a big astronomy research department there. So it's a little bit unclear, but in certain, basically the criteria that we are thinking of is a small, it's more small department or small research activity it could be like a liberal arts university with like one astronomer in the physics in a small physics department, or it could be like a not very well connected astronomy activity in a big institution. So it's really not like black or white, but more like different cases. So yeah, we are right now, in order to determine that, what we are doing right now is discuss site needs with consultants. So we're talking with different astronomers, basically, in different institutions that themselves helped develop this outreach and develop like programs, similar programs, to kind of like help us shape the message to the specific expansion sites. And our goal potentially is to highlight and identify at least 10 sites that would be listed as potential like hosts for fellows. And again, we are the message that we want to be left with you is that we are constantly like, we are waiting for, if you know people that are that would be interested or that have the criteria or requirement for the expansion site, please send us emails and contact us in order to reach out to them. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Iman, and thank you to all of the speakers throughout the session. We're transitioning now to our Q&A part. As I said, people can post questions in the chat or the Slack channel for this session, which is posted on the session website in the schedule. Okay, so maybe I'll give folks a little bit of time. I'd like to ask maybe the first question. So one question about the Ideas Lab, it wasn't clear, I think, are potential applicants expected to give presentations of maybe their past or current work at the Ideas Lab, or are they there to attend presentations from potential mentors and to mingle and discuss?
I think the latter is our hope. We would hate for people to feel like, even if we're telling them this is not required for the application and that it's not part of the decision process, that they still have to then sort of propose their work and give a mini version of their dissertation talk. I think that's exactly the opposite. Instead, we'd really like for people to have conversations and maybe a few presentations to attend.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. Well, if it's okay, I have another question about the community impact statement, and maybe in connection to Ideas Lab. My understanding was that it could be very broad in terms of what impact an applicant could envision. I guess one example that was brought up, EPO topics from broader impacts, like NSF broader impacts, but it could also, what other examples might you give? And I guess the connected sub-question in my mind is, do you think, and I guess I'm addressing it to Masao and Jim in partnership, do you think that in the Ideas Lab, there would also be presentations that could give options for community impact to potential applicants?
I can say a few things. So one of the other community impact things that I had in mind, especially for LSST, is software development and algorithm development. If your science requires something that, you know, is specialized in some kind of analysis that has a wider use in the other science areas, I would definitely count that as a community impact contribution. But like you said, EPO activities and other, you know, non-technical things are also part of that.
We have a couple of questions for the audience. Jim, do you want to contact if any of this will be part comment for the Ideas Lab, but very briefly?
Yeah, just briefly that, yeah, we're hoping to have a couple presentations about sort of the science opportunities and also sort of the broader impact opportunities. So I think this is one of the things we'd like to have presented to give people sort of inspiration for their conversations.
Mm-hmm. Great. One question for Jenno, I would say, for fellows outside the US, are the research allowances pegged to the US dollar, or will allowances be made for local currencies and local economies? Will cost of traveling to and from Chile for collaborative visits, if they are included, the cost is very different for if you are in Europe or if you are in North America. So
Yeah,
maybe Jenno can take this.
Yes, I can take it in the sense that I can say we have a task force that's called the Logistics Task Force. And the primary goal of that task force is to deal with exactly this type of question, especially for international fellows. And most of the members of that task force are from outside the US because of the complexities related to seating fellows outside the US. So we will have answers, but we don't have them yet.
And another question from the audience, we still have, maybe I'll take an extra minute. Given that Rubin LSST data will not be flowing at 100% rate during year 3, until year 3 of the first cohort, will using that data be important part of the research plan in the first cohort applications, or would preparatory work be also valued? Maybe selection, I guess. Masao, what do you think?
Yeah, I can comment on that. I think absolutely preparatory work is extremely valued. And I see this question came from Sarab, who wants to study type 1a supernovae. And, you know, these are things that just cannot be done in the first year or two. And so any study that's related to preparing for the science that will come out 5 years after data acquisition starts will be definitely valued.
Great. I don't see, oh, let me check Slack. Oh, yes, there was a question. I know that, but I would, I don't know if we can go. Are you concerned? I'll go ahead. Are you concerned that the timing of the ideas workshop will not be good for professors from small and teaching heavy institutions? And Jim, can you give your quick answer? It's already on Slack as well.
Yeah, I'll just say what I said there, which is just that, yes, we are concerned. We would like this to be as broadly available as possible. We did talk to a few people who work at smaller colleges, and they said that Fridays for some of them are a lighter day. And so that was preferred over, say, like a Monday or a Wednesday. It's obviously not optimal. And same problem with caregivers and parents where weekends versus weekdays don't usually work. So we're hoping that Friday is the middle ground.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I will make one quick comment on the software development part in terms of community impact and our potential applicants, that the link connection, which Jenno did mention, will bring the fellows in contact with actual professional software engineers, thanks to the Schmidt Futures initiative and support of the link initiative. So it doesn't mean that in order to be selected, you have to do software development, but you might have ideas for how to collaborate with the software engineers to eventually impact the community. So I'd like to also make that comment. So with that, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Amir, for everything. And thank you, Jenno and the whole team. Bye-bye.